Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I am the Executive Director here at Ikahi Mediation Center. We are located on Hawaii Island. For those of you who are off island or out of state, we have the volcano here, and we're in the news when that happens. This is our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch series that happens on third Thursdays from 12 to 1 Hawaii Standard Time. Ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center, and we serve East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options, and to find their own best solutions. To achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and training, like this talk, to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. As I mentioned, this Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you need to register on Eventbrite each time to receive the link. And I believe I see our next speaker, Charlie Young, in the Zoom chat. So I'm going to put a message here for that talk in the chat if you'd like to register. The topic is courteous curiosity, a proactive approach to interacting with others. And we welcome you to join us for that talk. At the end of today, we will ask if you could please fill out our short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. And when I put the survey link in the chat, you just have to click into it to give us, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 questions. And at the end of the talk, I will also be sending out an email with Michael's PowerPoint slides, a link to the video for today, and also I will re-put that survey in there because occasionally someone will tell us that the link that we put in the chat doesn't work. Without further ado, let me introduce our topic. Practice alone does not make perfect. 9 attributes of a reflective practitioner. And our speaker, Michael Lane, who has mediated family, workplace, and organizational disputes for over 40 years. We were just chatting that he has retired as a mediator because he's doing other things like writing and teaching. Back in 1992, he founded one of the first graduate programs in dispute resolution, and he has authored the Practitioner's Guide to Reflective Practice and Conflict Resolution, which is, I believe, the one you are going to be working on a second edition of. Is that right, Michael?
That's
yes?
That's right.
And he also co-authored The Making of a Mediator, Developing Artistry in Practice. As part of his commitment to mediator excellence, Michael currently facilitates 8 monthly reflective practice groups for mediators from around the globe. Please take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for the chance to be here. I am, this is going to be, and I hope for all of us, an enjoyable, interesting, maybe slightly provocative in a very wonderful, positive way, conversation, because I'm hoping that you will engage with me and ask questions and offer comments. I'm happy to talk about these ideas. I have been talking about them for years. I can talk for hours. So that's never the issue. The point of it is to engage and hope that you will as well. Now, some of you, there may be some of you who are not practitioners, who've not either volunteer or professional, mediators or otherwise involved in conflict resolution work. And I'm going to try to present the material in a way that is, but it's, because I am a mediator, because it's grounded in conflict resolution, and yet there are, to my mind, these attributes are as applicable to us in everyday life. They are, in a sense, universal qualities. They are not grounded solely in mediation or other conflict resolution practice. And one thing I will say at the outset is that there are now 10 attributes, not just 9. Yes, this is a process, this is an iterative process. When I first wrote, co-authored The Making of a Mediator, my colleague and co-author Allison Taylor and I had 6 hallmarks. And 19 years later, when I published the second book, it morphed into 9 attributes, and now there are 10. But let's start and bring up the presentation, and we'll go through this together. Let me just, before I go into the attributes, I want to tell a short story because, well, for 2 reasons. Well, 3. One, I can. I've got the podium, but more to the point, it's a story I love, and a story that, because it's true, it captures the essence to me of what I think about reflective practice, and what reflective practice stands for to me in just basic terms. Pardon me. Is the opportunity to learn from and through our experiences, not just to have experiences. We all do, but we can take advantage of those experiences in order to enrich ourselves and our work. So here's the story. I was on a flight, a brief flight. I live in Florida, and this was a flight from Atlanta to Sarasota, where I live. It's a little over an hour flight. I was in the aisle seat, and as I sat down and took out my my book to read, yes, I still read with paper. I like that. I noticed next to me a young girl, probably 8 years old, 7, 8, 9 years old, and she was on her knees. And she held in her hand this controller for a video game that was played on the seatback screen. Pardon me. Next to her, on the window seat, was a man whom I imagine might be, and then later learned for sure, had to be her dad. Because of the interactions that I'll describe. So she was playing tic-tac-toe. And she was playing with pelicans and fish, and she was the pelican. And she was just so intent with this device in her hand, fixated on the screen, as only an unself-conscious and absolutely curious 8-year-old child can be. And after a few minutes, she turned to her father and she said, "Dad, this isn't any fun. All the games end in a tie. Nobody wins, nobody loses." And her dad turned to her and he said, "So what would you like to do about it?" She said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, think about it for a second." She did. She said, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my pelican in the corner." He said, "Give it a try." And she did, and she won. And then she won a second game, and a third, and a fourth. And with each win, she bounced that much higher off the seat in enthusiasm. And then, as things would happen, the next game was a tie, and the next, and the next, and the next. And she again turned to her father. And she said, "Dad, I won some, but now they're tied all again." He said, "Why do you think that's happening?" And she said, I don't know. Maybe I think the computer figured out what I'm doing." He said, "Oh, okay. And what do you want to do about it?" She said, "I'm going to put my pelican in the middle." He said, "Okay, give it a try." And she did. And she won. And then she won again. And then it was time for us to land. And she put the equipment away. And I thought that I had just witnessed an absolutely marvelous exchange between a child and a parent, in which the parent offered no advice or solutions to the child. He absolutely believed in her capacity and actually in the importance of her figuring out the solutions for herself, which she did. All he did was give her encouragement. He gave her support. He asked her a few questions, and she did all the rest. And to me, she was not just learning how to play the game. Much more important, she was learning how to learn for herself. So when she comes up against another experience that is unfamiliar, that is confusing, that is unsettling in some way or another, she has now a tool that she can use, this capacity to learn how to learn from her experience. And it embodies, as you, I think about this story as I talk to you about these attributes, because to me at least, that story illustrates most of these attributes. Now, I was asked recently by a group of, I was doing a meeting with a group of students, law students as it happens. And one of them said, well, how did you come up with these attributes? You know, they just sort of float in the air, and he grabbed a couple and said, oh, these make good sense. And I said, no, you know, it comes from years and years of observing what makes for excellence in our work. And I said as well, I spent lots of time reading and even more importantly, talking with my colleagues and finding out what they saw as the qualities that that made for excellence in practice, because that's been my interest and my passion for going on 40 years, since I first discovered a book actually recommended to me, Peter Adler, by Robert Benjamin, called The Reflective Practitioner by a man named Donald Schoen. And having read that book, I had a moment, or several of moments really, where I was like the cartoon characters that we all see when something is astonishing and, you know, their eyes just bug out of their head. I was having moment after moment of that, like that, as I read through this book. And to me, what it helped me understand were ways in which I could become more adept, more resourceful, more resilient, more responsive, and ultimately more competent at the practice of mediation. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a bit about today. So here are the 10 attributes, and I will go through them one at a time and share with you some thoughts. But as I do, please know that I very much would like your comments, your questions, observations. If you have an example you'd like to share that represents one of these attributes, please do. Also, what I want to say before I go into all of them is that they represent to me two elements. They are both, they both represent a mindset. In other words, a way of looking at the world, a way of looking at ourselves in the world, or the way of looking at ourselves in our practice. And they also represent behaviors, because it's not just the behavior that matters, it's the mindset that fuels the behavior that's also important. And twinned, they become very, very powerful and effective tools for us. So these, you can see these 10: be curious, resilient, nurture simplicity, value ambiguity, and then something that may seem ironic in conjunction with nurture simplicity, which is pay attention to detail, learn ceaselessly, resist certainty, a problem that we as the older we get as adults, we have great difficulty with this one. balance our commitment, a commitment to something with our flexibility to be able to respond in the moment. Welcome failure as a mentor. And the last one, Julie, the 10th, that's now part, and maybe by the time I get to writing the second edition of the book, there'll be an 11th. I don't know. But for now, we've got 10. So here's the first, to stay curious. And I love this quote from, I'm not going to read the quotations. You're all capable of it. And also you'll all have these slides. And by the way, I love these images. They are both evocative and interesting. And every one of them comes from a website called unsplash.com. They have 700,000-800,000 or more images that are free to use, high resolution, beautiful, no royalty payments. They only ask, as you see at the bottom, that you acknowledge the photographer and that it comes from that website. That's it. That's the only request. So think about this young child that was playing tic-tac-toe. I mean, she was fascinated and she was curious. And I also think about curiosity as like I have twin grandchildren who are about to be 7. And when I talk with them, they are exactly what 7-year-olds ought to be, you know? Obviously, as their grandfather, I think they're fabulous. But more to the point here, they are just what 7-year-olds should be. They are voracious learners. They just don't stop. They want to embrace everything. They want to understand everything. They ask question after question after question. Why is this? Why is that? Why is this? And I've learned, I did some research about curiosity, and this researcher whose paper I was reading included a graph, and the graph showed on the vertical axis it was curiosity, and on the horizontal axis it was age. And over the first 9-10 years, it's a virtual straight line up, and then it begins to fall off and fall off. And by the time we get to 20, 25, it falls off substantially. And when it gets to 40 and 50, it is very, very low. Because we have so much experience, we have so much knowledge, we think that we understand things. As adults, we're supposed to understand. We're supposed to know about stuff. And so we don't ask questions. We aren't curious. And this is, to me, one of the most wonderful things that we can do. And it is an attribute that I think embraces, like humility, which I'll get to at the end, embraces all of the others. Resilience is another quality, another one of the attributes that I think of. And one example that I think about is that resilience is when we are experiencing something difficult, but can find within us the capacity to remain somewhat focused and calm. And the image that I have is of a water bird. Pick anyone, duck, loon, whatever water birds you can think of. And you watch it glide across the surface of the water. But in the meantime, its feet are furiously paddling underneath the surface. So there is all of this energy that's happening, but at the same time, we can be focused and attentive. And in our work, particularly as in doing our conflict work, this is a key attribute, because things are coming at us at such a rapid pace. The interactions, even if it's just two people, but then you add, I noticed, and I know that Peter, you work with larger groups of people. Marina works with large groups of people. You start multiplying the number of interactions that are going on that you're trying to pay attention to, while you're also paying attention to yourself. You're paying attention to the process. You're paying attention to the problem that's being discussed. Stuff is happening so rapidly, and yet we have to be able to be focused and attentive for what we do. Okay, nurture simplicity. I think of, when I think about this, I think about Occam's razor. Some of you may have heard of that or know of it. And, I may not do it justice, but to me, what it means is that if you're faced with a problem and there are multiple solutions, more often than not, the simplest solution is the one most appropriate. And, I think about this, that just thinking about an example that I had. I was called into a workplace, and there were multiple problems in the interactions among the people in the workplace. And it was affecting productivity. It was affecting their ability to collaborate when they needed to collaborate and cooperate on projects. And one of the problems that was described to me was that the photocopier would run out of paper and nobody would replace the paper. If you used up the last sheet, that was it. You'd walk away from, the employee would walk away from it, not tell anybody, just walk away. And as I began to inquire and talk about this, as it turned out, the paper supply was kept in a locked closet, and the key to the locked closet was kept in the secretary's drawer. And the secretary would lock the drawer whenever the secretary was not present. So people got into the habit of just not bothering. So they were going on and on. This problem, if you can imagine, had existed for a year and troubled them. And we then began thinking about what are the possible solutions. And what they came up with was a very obvious one. They bought a new stand for the photocopier that had a vast supply area below where the paper was kept, and it was unlocked because it needn't be. Nobody else was going to have access to it. And that was their simple solution to a problem that had confounded them for 12 months. Okay, the next is ambiguity. And in our work in dealing with conflict, we're faced with ambiguity every moment, because if things weren't ambiguous, people would have figured out how to solve the problems themselves. And as they talk, what we find ourselves is, first of all, having to be capable of being calm in the face of the ambiguity and accept it as part of a natural process that will unfold. We have to trust that that will be the case. And living with that and accepting that things can be ambiguous is a really important, first of all, mindset, that we accept that ambiguity and then we honor it in the work that we do. We don't try to force solutions. We allow solutions to emerge in the conversations among the parties. Because the impulse we have, look, the people, and I can say this with almost universally, the people that I have met in my colleagues whom I've met over the years are universally kind-hearted, good people who only want to help others find solutions to thorny situations that trouble them. And our impulse as being good-hearted people is when we're faced with the challenges that people present, we want to get in there and we want to make it happen. We want to make something good out of something that's troubling, that's messy, that's disturbing, that's unsettling. And we have to live with the fact that things can be ambiguous and still there is hope that a solution can be found, that the people who are involved with your support can work their way through the ambiguity and find a solution. The next, if you've got, I'm just going to stop for a second and check. Julie, how are we doing in terms of any questions?
Nothing in the chat so far.
Okay, well, come on, folks. I'm eager for you to engage with me and offer comments or questions. So I'm gonna plunge on and just know that I'm interested. So pay attention to detail. I want to give you an example of how this can play out. Well, so two things I want to say. One of the things that I have experienced is that when people talk to us, we are often listening, figuring out how we want to respond to what they're saying. And when we learn to pay attention to detail, one of the things that can shift, one of the behaviors that really needs to shift, is that we listen in order to understand what's happening for that person, those people with whom we're dealing. We have to suspend the idea that we need to respond immediately. Instead, we need to be able to pay attention to them. And the only way genuinely to pay attention is to listen. I looked for, before the presentation today, I have a button a lapel button that I picked up at a mediation conference, has to be 30 years ago at least. And in the center of the button, it says mediator. And on the rim, it says, when I listen, people talk. When I listen. And that's what pay attention to detail means. And I'll give you one example. I was mediating a dispute involving an employee who had been a longtime employee of a company who'd been fired, discharged. And the question was, the company was adamant that she was not going to be rehired under any circumstances. And yet she had risen from a very junior position in the company to a place of importance over 22 years. A succession of not just positive reviews, but promotions. And now she was unemployed. And there was the conversation was largely focused on any compensation that might be available. And the company offered a package, and it seemed as though the person, the former employee, was prepared to accept. But I heard something in her voice. She knew that the settlement was the best she was going to get. She was a pragmatic person. She really understood. She fought for everything that she wanted. She was able to speak with her own true voice about what mattered to her. And the company representative listened carefully and thoughtfully, but still there was something. And I asked her, I said, I talked to her in private, and I said, so are you prepared? She said, well, yeah, I have to. What's my choice? I said, yeah, but you don't want to, do you? She said, well, I do, but I don't. I need the money, and I need a good reference. So yes, I want to accept. But I said, so what's the but? And she said, nobody has bothered to say that I really did a damn good job for that company. I said, okay, so that would be really important to you. She said, yes, it would. I said, well, let's go back and talk. And in the conversation, I asked the company representative not to say anything to her, but I said to the company representative lots of questions that led the company representative just spontaneously to say, I am so sorry. We have to let you go, and you know why. But you were a marvelous employee for such a long time. It's really painful to do this. Done, settled, over. And it was because I paid attention. I listened and I watched. And those details, they may seem small, but they are really critical. Okay, moving on. So related to curiosity.
Michael, can I interject? Because I do see a couple things in the chat. Is this a good time?
Absolutely, Julie.
Laura is asking why ambiguity and not uncertainty?
Well, I think of ambiguity as, I mean, I suppose you could use either word, but ambiguity implies something where you've got two competing sort of forces. So imagine this kind of a situation. There you are, you've got a problem that you're personally, that you're facing, a conundrum, something, and the way you usually like to engage with people, in problem solving, is collaboratively. You like to talk to your friends or your colleagues, and you get different perspectives and so on. But this is hard for you, a very difficult problem to describe in a way that makes sense, or you're a little embarrassed because at some level, it seems like it should be such a simple problem to solve. And so you're left with the ambiguity of thinking the only way to approach this is to solve it myself, which is not my preferred way to solve a problem. But it seems under the circumstances like I have to, but I really don't want to. I really want to collaborate with others. I want others' point of view, and you're going back and forth and back and forth. So it isn't just the uncertainty of the solution to the problem. It's the ambiguity that's caused by, on the one hand, a desire, a valuing of collaboration, and a sense of privacy, of individuality, of embarrassment even about the problem that you're facing. So that is, to me, why I see ambiguity and not uncertainty.
Somebody commented on the same strain. For me, ambiguity has a positive vibe, uncertainty has a fear vibe. And then another comment in the chat was paying attention to detail is the opposite of multitasking, a myth many still believe in.
Well, and I just want to say something. If you ask anybody who does mediation work, whether it is with two people, two neighbors, with a dispute over a barking dog, or it is a complex, multi-party, long-term conflict intervention, the role of the intervener, the mediator, the facilitator, whatever word we use to describe that person who is assisting others. We are multitasking like you wouldn't imagine. I mean, it is astonishing. And any of us who've done this work will readily understand, will readily agree that it is a constant multitasking. Now, the difference is that we are learning how to that the multitasking still has a singular focus around which it is organized. Whereas often when I see multitasking is when somebody is listening to this presentation, they're typing an email to somebody else on another device and checking their phone for text messages coming in, right? You can't do all those. Those are three separate activities with different focuses. And that kind of multitasking leads you to miss the details.
And then the last thing before we'll let you get back to your presentation, because we do want you to be able to get through, and it's 12:40, is a comment and a question. It seems the more I work on mindfulness as a listener, the more I want to give the difficult people time to talk in order to understand how to address their problems. This can make the less difficult, activated individuals quite frustrated. I wonder if it erodes their confidence in me as a mediator. How do we get to the root of the problem without listening too long to problematic individuals?
Wow. I'm not going to be able to answer that in a way that I'm satisfied with. Let me just say that. And maybe the person who posted that is satisfied with, because of time and because what I would really want to understand, if that person, I run these reflective practice groups where we learn from those experiences. And what I would do was take what this person has posted as a comment and explore a particular experience where this has arisen in order to understand how she or he experienced the problem, and then look at ways in which it's possible to address it. So I think there are a variety of ways, but it's individual to each of us how we might do this. But there are a variety of techniques that we can use to draw people out in a way that is useful to them and useful to the process. But that's as I said, it's not going to be as satisfactory an answer as I wish that I could give to that person, because yeah.
Okay, we'll let you get back to your talk.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I'm aware of this, and that to stay fresh in my life, I need to learn continuously. And we all do this in a variety of ways, but we need to do this in order to keep our minds active and to be fresh in whether we do it by reading, whether we do it by listening, whether we do it through videos, whether we do it in conversations. It is the mindset first that I want to learn something. I want to experience something new. And it can be an adventure that we're learning from. I'll give you an example. I was asked to go to help out in a workplace situation, and it was a small work team of 10 people, and they were in constant conflict, and it both affected them individually and it affected what was happening in terms of their ability to do their work. So when I was first asked to do this, the person who invited me, I said, yeah, I think I could, I hope that I could be helpful, but I think it's the kind of problem I could address. But then I was told where the problem was. And it was in an Inuit village in Arctic Canada. So I left Florida and traveled to 800 miles south of the North Pole, to a village of 1,400 people. I arrived on what they called the last day of the sun. The last day of the year, December 7th that year, was the last day you could see the orb of the sun. Everything was unfamiliar to me. Everything was foreign. I mean, they all, fortunately, in addition to whatever, I can't pronounce properly their language, but in addition, they spoke English fluently. So that, at least that wasn't a problem. But I had to be like a 6 or 7-year-old kid and learn actively about the culture, enough about the culture to be attentive to them. I was never, in a week's time I was there, going to learn enough to say, oh yeah, I understand. No way. But I had to engage and ask lots and lots of questions. I had to be constantly curious about it. So I think that it is the mindset. I mean, I could have gone in there and I could have just said, okay, workplace problems are workplace problems. Let's just get down to it. But that would have been disingenuous, disrespectful, if not just downright offensive, not to understand that I was a foreigner. I had another cute situation once. I was invited to give a presentation, a course in mediation in Trinidad. Was my first time there. And there were arrayed 30-some people. And I said to them, I said, I hope you don't mind, but I may ask you to repeat yourselves until I learn to understand your accent. And a chorus of 35 people said to me, what accent? And I went, oh. That was, when we get to humility, that was a humbling moment. That was a moment of recognition that I was in their place and I needed to figure out how I could connect to them and bring whatever I knew to them in a way that was useful and relevant to them. That was the goal. So it is a process of learning. And this is, I'm going to move on, or I won't get to all 10. So I love this quote from Stephen Hawking. I'm going to give you a second to read it. So this is a particular problem, again, for us, for two reasons. As adults, it's a problem for the reason I described before in terms of our diminished curiosity. We have the sense that we know so much, that we're certain about an answer. And then you couple that with a great desire to be helpful, whether it's helpful as a friend, as a spouse or other family member, as a conflict intervener. We think we know the answer. We think we know what should happen. And we have to resist that impulse because our certainty isn't their certainty. Our answer isn't their answer. And when we have that attitude, one of the things that naturally flows from that is that we begin to treat people with dignity and respect. We don't assume that we are so damn smart, so clever, so experienced, so knowledgeable, but we treat everyone then with the understanding that they have a body of knowledge that is unique to them that we don't know about, and that the solutions to their problems are ones that they're going to have to live with, that they will need to make work, not us. And so we pull back from that sense of certainty. All right, I'm going to, for sake of time, I'm going to move on a little bit. One of the things about this is we need to balance our commitment and our flexibility. So one of the things that's really important is that whenever somebody tells us a story, we as human beings seek to make meaning out of the story. We seek to understand it. We seek to find some sort of explanation for why this problem exists, why this situation has arisen. And we do this. It's a quite normal and natural process that we engage in. And that understanding, that explanation for something that we come up with, we then begin to act on as if that were true. And we have to be flexible enough to back off of that when we recognize that what we thought was going on proved not to be the case. A very quick example. I was observing a small claims mediation between two people, one of them the owner of an automobile, the other an owner of a repair shop. And the mediator was treating this the way the mediator has treated hundreds of other disputes like this type, which is it's about money. It's about whether the repair was done and how much the repair should be. And the mediator was getting all, they would talk about money, they would talk about whether the repair was done. And each of the people, the more each side talked about it. So the mediator's assumption is, the explanation is, this is a dispute about money. It will be resolved if one person pays money or pays less money, and that will be the answer. Let's find the number that works best for these two people. But the more the conversation went on, the more resistant they each became, until the mediator took a step back. He said, just give me a second. And I later learned in a conversation with the mediator, because that's why I was there, was as a mentor to observe and comment, that the mediator was aware that this was going nowhere, but that there was an explanation. And instead, the mediator turned to the people and said, so I get it that this is a problem. And I've watched the two of you now argue for 20 minutes and you're no closer to solving it. There's something else going on. I wonder what that could be. And the automobile owner said, I've been going to this guy for 22 years and I trusted him. And now I'm not sure I can trust him ever again to take my car. And the repair shop person said, yep, you've been coming for 22 years and I've delivered good service for those years. And I want you to come back for the next 22 years. So then the mediator said, how can it happen? How can you work this out so that you, the automobile owner, can trust the repair shop and you, the repair shop, can have a confident customer, longtime customer? And that shifted the conversation dramatically, because it took a shift in the thinking about what the problem really was. Yes, money was involved, but that got easily resolved once they acknowledged what they both needed from one another. Okay. This piece, by the way, this is a collage that was done by one of my sons. He calls it part of his ransom note series because he, like a ransom note, he cut out letters from magazines and newspapers and put this together. And the longer quote comes from Samuel Beckett. And it is, ever tried, ever failed, fail again, fail better. And this is a really important lesson for us. And it is a recognition, first of all, again, remember I said that this is both mindset and behavior. So the mindset is, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes as I go along in my life, in my work. I'm going to do that. Something is going to happen and I'm not going to be perfect. And I need to accept that that will happen. And yes, I can be chagrined. I can be irritated with myself. I can be angry. I can be frustrated. But then what do I do? What do I do with that experience? And for me, these are moments of extraordinary opportunity for us to learn. As long as we don't get stuck in that mindset that I shouldn't have failed. And I was just talking this morning with a friend who is he's a peacemaker, and the way he describes himself is mediator, peacemaker, and golfer. And what it was reminding me of is and there's research to support this as well, that you go out on the driving range, the practice tee, and you hit ball after ball after ball. Well, you can hit 1,000 balls, but if you're not paying any attention to what's happening, if you're not using each stroke as an opportunity to learn how better to hit the next ball, you're wasting the opportunity. You see a ball go where you didn't want it to go and go, oh, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Let me try. But if you're not paying attention, if you're not using those experiences as learning opportunities, it's a wasted effort. So it's really critical to be aware of this. There's a piece in Michael Jordan's biography, the great basketball player, where he talks about what happens after he's lost a game. That the next day he's back practicing harder than before because he's thinking about the mistakes he made in that game. And he's figuring out how he's not going to make that mistake again by doing something different. Not just by kicking himself and saying, well, I made that mistake, but by learning from it. Okay. And the last, embrace humility. So how am I doing on time? Oh, not much. So I'll be brief. And I will tell you a story rather than talking much about humility. So I did, in my practice, I did a lot of family and divorce work. And over time, I got to realize that there were certain issues for people, for parties who were separating or divorcing, that were key. And generally speaking, at least up to this point in my career, which had been probably by that time 7 or 8 years only, dealing with household furnishings and those sorts of things tended to be easier to deal with. Because those that had strong sentimental attachment had come from one person's family or the other, and okay. And then the other was just stuff that they had bought. So there I am meeting with a new couple, and I said, we'll talk about these issues. I said, but probably we'll save this was my hubris in action. We'll save the personal property for, might be the easiest thing. And the two of them looked at each other and they started giggling, not just smiling, they giggled. And one of them, she reached into her purse and she pulled out a 16-page, single-spaced, typed list of everything in their house because they were collectors, because they had gone all over the world and they knew they had a skill at being able to find something in flea markets and so on. I was embarrassed. And they laughed at me, and I had to laugh at myself and just admit that I learned a lesson from that. And this is, again, sort of connects back to failure. It wasn't just that I said, I'll never do that again. I thought, why is that not a good idea on my part? And what I started doing, instead of presuming that I had an idea about what they might be wanting to talk about, I would just simply ask lots of questions. Tell me what matters to you. What matters most? What are the issues that comes up? What are the order in which you think you might want to take these? It was an embarrassing moment and a rich one that I gratefully share, because with all of these moments, and there have been many, and many of them I've turned, as a teacher, I've turned into role play exercises as a continuing reminder to myself to be humble about my own work. So lastly, yes, this is the book that I have written, and that's my publisher's contact. Equally as important to me, my email address. And I've formed an institute with a colleague, Susan Terry, from Vermont, the Reflective Practice Institute, and we offer trainings, and there's information about reflective practice there, as on my own website, the Reflective Practitioner. And I encourage you to ask me questions, to ask for information. I've got a wealth of resources. I'd be happy to hear from you and to share what I know. I can share with you information about new reflective practice groups that are starting. There's one that's starting actually at the beginning of June. I haven't talked much about those groups, but anyway, ask me. I'm glad to be glad to hear from you. Oof. Okay.
Okay, just in the nick of time, right? Okay, so you thought we're gonna have so much time for questions and conversations, and of course, you have so much wisdom to share, and I think everybody was listening carefully. It may be possible that, whoops, sorry, that's my alarm going off. I usually have that silence during these talks. So there have been people putting chats, notes in the chat about various things. I haven't seen any more questions come up. We are at the 1 o'clock hour. So I think what I'll do is thank everybody for coming today who needs to leave right now. We do appreciate you doing that short online survey. I'll put it in the chat box again because it starts getting pushed up as people are saying thank you and goodbye. We also will be sending out email of the slides that Michael shared, as well as the link to the video recording of this talk. We appreciate you, Michael. Everybody, please, let's show our Zoom appreciation. It's silent. I can be the loud clapper, maybe.
Thank you.
And we do hope we will see you next month for our talk with Charlie Young on courteous curiosity, a proactive approach to interacting with others. I'll also put that in the chat right now. I don't know, Michael, if you want to stay on for a moment or two in case anybody has anything to say or ask. It's entirely up to you. I don't want to put you on the spot if you have another obligation.
I have no other obligation. It's 7 o'clock here. I have nothing to do but eventually have some dinner. And right now, I'd be delighted to stay on for a few minutes for anyone who wants to stay, and either, like some of my friends whom I see, hello, Roger, who've joined, just to say hello or to answer questions or hear comments. I'd be delighted to, for anyone who'd like to stay. And thank you, Julie. Hi, Chuck.
Thank you.